A man and his dog never expected this when a wolf approached them outside his home. Even though they're often presented as large and scary creatures, wolves look a lot sweeter when you get a chance to meet them in person. They actually look more like large but friendly dogs. However, despite how cute they might appear, wolves are still wild animals, which means you have to be careful around them. The story you're about to listen to might change the way you think about wolves forever. Back in 2004, an Alaskan wildlife photographer named Nick Jans took his dog out for an ordinary walk in the snow. He didn't expect that he would come across a huge wolf in front of his home. Naturally, Nick was worried about his dog's safety, but what happened next left him in shock. As a wildlife enthusiast, Nick loved spending time outdoors with his dog Dakota. He would usually sit on the porch and let Dakota run around or sit beside him. Suddenly, a wolf appeared out of nowhere and stood right in front of Nick and Dakota. Nick sat there surprised, and before he could even do anything, Dakota quickly ran toward the wild animal. Perhaps Dakota thought that the wolf was nothing but another dog. Little did she know that the wild animal wasn't ready to play. Maybe Dakota sensed the danger and decided to step up and protect her home. Naturally, Nick was terrified when he saw his dog run towards a wild wolf. At this point, he wasn't sure whether or not he should approach. After all, the wild wolf could hurt both him and the dog. But he couldn't just sit there and watch his dog get hurt. Then, something unexpected happened. While Nick expected a very bad outcome of this situation, he couldn't believe when he saw what happened next. The dog and the wolf started playing like they were closest of friends. When he realized that the dog was safe, Nick grabbed his camera and took this photo. The wolf kept showing up at their home to play with Dakota. Since the wild animal liked spending time there, Nick decided that he needed to give it a name. It seemed like Romeo was the perfect name for this charming wild animal. Even though Romeo seemed so friendly, Nick had to remind himself at times that he was in fact dealing with a wild animal. He made sure to keep an eye out for Dakota every time she went outside to play with Romeo. Besides, just because Romeo and Dakota got along so well, it didn't mean that other dogs in the neighborhood would like having a wolf around. After playing with Dakota for a few days, Romeo decided to explore the area and see what other dogs were up to. He found his way to the Mendenhall Glacier Park, where the neighborhood dogs would often hang out. Shortly after, you could see Romeo running around and playing with all the local dogs. After meeting Dakota, Romeo started hanging out with other canine friends. He quickly became a part of the neighborhood, and everyone got used to him. Even though he loved wrestling with the dogs, Romeo was very gentle and careful not to hurt them. Naturally, people were frightened when Romeo first appeared at the local park. When you see a large wolf in front of you, you can't help but think about all the bad things that could happen. However, the neighbors quickly saw that Romeo had nothing but good intentions. Even though the wolf was much larger than the dogs at the Mendenhall Glacier Park, people didn't see him as a safety concern. After all, Romeo was very gentle and friendly with both humans and his canine friends. All their worries quickly went away when they saw Romeo playing with the dogs. When it comes to the dogs at the park and their reactions to seeing a wolf, some of them were evidently upset by the large wild animal. There's no doubt that Romeo looks quite scary when you see him for the first time. However, it didn't take long for the local dogs to get used to his presence at the park. It seemed like Romeo only wanted some company. He liked to socialize and spend time with other animals, which is why he kept returning to the park to play with the dogs. It's natural for a wolf separated from his pack to go around looking for a new one. After a few days, everyone saw Romeo as nothing but a friendly animal. He looked like a big dog who loved to play with other animals. He even behaved like a dog at times. Nick once said that he would bring out toys that he'd stashed and bring them to the people at the park. It seemed like Romeo was influenced by the dogs so much that he started behaving like one. The Alaskan residents quickly accepted him as one of their own. At this point, it was clear that Romeo was no threat to dogs or people in the area. During an interview about this unusual situation, Nick mentioned that Romeo liked bringing toys and other items to people at the park. He said, "One was a styrofoam float. Romeo would pick it up and bring it to my friend Harry to throw." It's quite likely that Romeo picked up on some canine behavior after watching his friends play fetch around the park. Perhaps he thought the games were fun and he wanted to participate, or this could simply be the result of innate canine behavior. It was more than obvious that Romeo was not a domesticated dog. However, despite being a wild animal, he behaved like most dogs at the park. He clearly understood the same sort of behaviors that we see in dogs, added Nick during the interview. After spending so much time with dogs, Romeo started understanding how they play and behave around people. Even though he's far from being a domesticated animal, he adjusted his wild behavior in order to fit in with the new pack. Nick couldn't help but appreciate the special experience that he was a part of. He and his dog welcomed a new friend of a completely different species. While some people would be too scared to let their dog walk outside after seeing a wolf, Nick enjoyed spending time with Dakota and Romeo. "We were these three species working out how to get along harmoniously, and we did," explained Nick. When you think about this situation, Nick was really a part of a rare experience. He definitely had some luck considering how badly things could have gone the first day Romeo had appeared in the neighborhood. During the following 6 years, Romeo regularly visited Nick and Dakota. He became a part of their family, and even though he never moved into their home, he was always around to play with his best friends. Between the years 2004 and 2009, a large black wolf used to visit the Mendenhall Glacier Park frequently and play with all the dogs there. If you had a chance to visit this spot back in the day, you could have witnessed this extraordinary experience. Romeo did not only earn the trust of the people in the community, but he also became an important part of it. Local residents loved visiting the park to play with the wolf and take stunning photos of the wild animal. Even those who didn't have dogs often stopped by the park to get a glimpse of this majestic beast. It was quite an extraordinary feeling for the members of the community to be able to trust a wild animal. What's even more extraordinary is that the wolf completely trusted them. Romeo soon became an important symbol in the area, showing that it is possible to become one with the land and wildlife around them. The locals in the area were so used to Romeo that they didn't have to worry about the fact that a giant wolf could hurt their dogs. At one point, everyone was scared of Romeo's appearance in the neighborhood, but those days were long gone. Despite the fact that so many years had gone by, people who were new to the area still freaked out when they saw a wolf playing with all the dogs. After all, this wasn't something you would see on an ordinary day. The locals no longer had an issue with a wolf being part of their community. It was the visitors who always freaked out when the wolf would come near them. After all, it is difficult to put your trust in a wild animal, especially when seeing it for the first time. The majority of folk tales and children's stories portray wolves as big and evil animals, but in reality, they are no different than dogs. All it takes is some time to get used to new behaviors, and a wolf can easily become man's best friend. When describing the wolf, Nick said, "Romeo was downright relaxed and tolerant from the start, as if he dropped out of the sky like a unicorn." Over the course of 6 years, the wolf had become friends with many sorts of dogs, from border collies and Labradors to small poodles. Sadly, these friendships couldn't last forever. Everything in life has to come to an end, and sadly, the end of this extraordinary tale was sudden and unexpected. No one could have predicted that Romeo was going to suffer a tragic fate, just like the character he was named after. If you didn't guess it already, the wolf was named after the popular character from Shakespeare's tragedy, Romeo and Juliet. Just like Romeo's life came to a tragic end in the play, so did the wolf suffer a similar fate. Romeo was shot and killed by hunters in 2009. This was truly a tragic event for everyone who lived in the Mendenhall Glacier Park area. People had lost a dear friend, and locals were devastated by this news. They even held a memorial service for Romeo and made a plaque in his memory. Romeo's plaque is still standing in the town of Juneau, where his story will never be forgotten. In case you ever get a chance to travel to Alaska, make sure you visit this place and see where Romeo used to play with the local dogs. The residents will tell you all the amazing stories that still live in their hearts. The engraving on the plaque says, Romeo 2003 to 2009. The spirit of Juneau's friendly black wolf lives on in this wild place. The plaque even features an image of Romeo above the touching inscription. There is no doubt that Romeo has made a long-lasting impression on everyone who had the chance to meet him. It is certain that the residents of Juneau are never going to forget him. Even Nick misses seeing Romeo and Dakota playing around together, and we're sure that Dakota misses her wild friend too. Despite being a wild animal, Romeo was one of the friendliest beings Nick had ever met in his life. Sadly, Romeo was shot by hunters for no reason, which should raise awareness about how much damage we are doing to the planet and its amazing wildlife. After Romeo passed away, Nick felt the need to make his story live on forever. He documented everything that had happened between 2003 and 2009 in his book called A Wolf Called Romeo. Make sure to grab a copy of the book if you want to know more about this amazing creature. Don't forget that Alaska is an incredible place where wild animals roam the streets freely. It's not uncommon for people in this area to come across wild creatures. In fact, a woman living close to Nick had her own wild encounter as well. Pam Oss was another wildlife enthusiast living in Unalaska, Alaska. She chose to live in this region because of all the animals she had a chance to meet. Some wild species would even approach her home and stand right in front of her porch. Rabbits, caribou, and hares were some of the most common wild visitors of Pam's home. She quickly fell in love with nature and this environment, so much so that she couldn't imagine herself living elsewhere. One day, Pam heard some strange noises coming from outside. She could usually recognize the animals by the noises they made, but this time it was different. Even though she was positive that the noise came from an animal, Pam hoped she wouldn't come across any intruders. Curious to find out what it was and slightly worried about her safety, Pam stepped outside to investigate. She moved slowly, not to startle the creature, because if it was an animal at her front porch, it could get scared and attack her. As she moved closer to the source of the noise, Pam realized that the animal was standing on her front porch. She looked out to see her new visitor, still moving slowly and very cautiously. Pam was still nervous because this whole situation could turn into a negative outcome. She feared that a thief could be lurking outside of her home, waiting for her to get out and leave the door unlocked. When she finally got to the porch, she saw her cat Gizmo outside. Nothing was strange here because Gizmo was allowed to spend time on the porch. He loved being both indoors and outdoors, so Pam didn't think anything was strange about the situation. It made sense that Gizmo had made all the noise. After all, he was a big cat and he loved jumping around. However, she realized that the noise still persisted, even though she could clearly see Gizmo sitting still at the porch. At this point, she knew it had to be someone else. When Pam looked at Gizmo, he didn't seem interested or startled in any way. He just went straight back to doing his business. It was clear that he wasn't the one behind the front porch noise. So, who else was there? Gizmo wasn't the only pet in Pam's home. She had another cat, and since Gizmo wasn't the one making the noise, it could be no one else but the second cat. However, the noise didn't even sound like it came from the cat. It was something different. Pam's other cat was named Suitcase, which is probably the weirdest yet cutest name for a cat ever invented. Suitcase and Gizmo were rarely ever separated. If you see Gizmo, then Suitcase is somewhere nearby as well. However, they were not together today. Pam looked around, but she couldn't find Suitcase anywhere. Since the other cat wasn't there, it was likely that it got into some trouble and had ended up causing the weird noise. All of a sudden, Suitcase jumped onto the porch, but the noise still didn't stop. With both cats seemingly innocent, Pam still had no idea where the noise was coming from. Shortly after, the noise stopped and both cats were sitting calmly at the front porch. Since neither Gizmo nor Suitcase were responsible for the strange sounds though, Pam had no idea where it came from or why. Things got back to normal quickly and everything was quiet. Pam believed that the noise was no longer relevant and that she would never know where it came from. With the day coming to an end, she was ready to forget about it and move on. However, what she saw next was a complete surprise. Gizmo got up and walked across the porch when Pam decided to go inside. That's when she spotted something extraordinary she hadn't seen there before. A huge, bald eagle was looking at her from the ledge around her home. This beautiful wild animal was quite common in this area. However, bald eagles don't usually approach humans. This one got so close to Pam, she couldn't believe it. Such a majestic wild animal was only a few feet away from her. Even though she was fascinated by the wild animal, Pam worried that if she startled it, something bad would happen. She didn't move for a few minutes to make sure the eagle was calm. All she wanted to do is snap a few pictures of the wild animal on her front porch before it went away forever. Then it came to her mind that there might be some danger hiding behind the situation. After all, eagles eat mammals that are the size of her cats. At this point, she realized that the huge bald eagle was getting closer and closer to her cat, Gizmo. Despite the possible danger, Gizmo didn't seem scared at all. The other cat was pretty calm as well. After a few minutes, Pam realized that the eagle had no intention of messing with the cats. After all, both cats were too heavy for an eagle to carry around. After she looked around once again, Pam noticed another bald eagle nearby. This one was standing on the lamppost at the end of her driveway, which was still pretty close to her home. She couldn't believe that 2 eagles had visited her in one day. But the show wasn't over yet. There was another visitor nearby waiting to be revealed. Pam heard a different noise and turned around to see a red fox walking on the front porch. It was like the wild animals decided to have a meeting right in front of her home. At this point, Pam was expecting to see more foxes coming around. She decided to share this unusual experience on social media, where she wrote, "Our fox and eagles and cats basically get along just fine here. They aren't always out to attack and kill each other. This can serve as a lesson from the wild animals that if they can get along, so can we."